more than 4 centuries have passed since over 12 million men and women were forcibly taken from their native African lands through perilous journeys and delivered as slaves in the Americas and Europe. The enduring impact of this historic forced migration continues to shape the African continent, reshaping its socio-cultural, economic, and political development. This act stripped African countries of a much-needed labor force, as it took people at their prime and most productive ages. The consequences of this forced migration have not only affected economic activities at the time, but have also been linked to the enduring poverty experienced on the continent. Welcome to today's video, where we will delve into the repercussions of slavery on African cultures and economies, leaving a stain that persists even after the abolition of this inhumane practice. Slavery stands as one of the most brutal practices in human history, and its devastating effects on African societies cannot be overstated. For centuries, European powers exploited Africa for slaves, leaving an indelible impact on the continent's economic advancement. Africa's human resources were siphoned away through various routes, whether across the Sahara, through the Red Sea from Indian Ocean ports, or across the Atlantic. Over at least 10 centuries, slavery served the interests of Muslim countries, and from the 9th to the 19th century, it was estimated to have affected millions. Additionally, more than 4 centuries of regular slave trade from the end of the 15th century to the 19th century played a significant role in building the Americas and the prosperity of Christian states in Europe. The figures, although contested, are staggering, with millions exported via different routes and contributing to the present circumstances of Africa. To truly comprehend the impact of slavery on African culture, it's essential to grasp the origins and nature of the slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade, which ran from the 15th to the 19th century, entailed capturing and selling African people to European traders, who transported them across the Atlantic Ocean to be sold as slaves in the Americas. This inhumane trade, driven by economic interests, was facilitated by European colonial powers establishing forts and trading posts along the African coast. One of the most significant impacts of slavery on African culture was the loss of traditional knowledge and practices. Enslaved Africans were forcibly uprooted from their homes, families, and communities, forced to work as slaves, and often stripped of their cultural identities, languages, and religions. This resulted in the adoption of the customs and practices of their enslavers, erasing many cultural practices and traditions passed down through generations. For instance, the practice of storytelling, essential for passing on history, traditions, and beliefs, was disrupted and lost due to forced migration. Similarly, traditional African music, vital in religious worship, storytelling, and entertainment, suffered as traditional instruments were lost or destroyed, and enslaved Africans were compelled to adopt the music and dance styles of their enslavers. Additionally, the process of forced conversion to Christianity led to the loss of many traditional religious practices and beliefs. Besides the loss of cultural practices, slavery had a profound impact on the social and economic structures of African societies. Forced migration disrupted communities, leading to a loss of labor and skills. This disruption significantly affected the economies of many African societies. Furthermore, slavery left a legacy of violence and trauma that continues to affect African societies today. Before the transatlantic slave trade, African societies had already developed sophisticated systems of trade, production, and commerce. These economies were diverse and dynamic, with each region specializing in various goods and services. West Africa was known for its gold, ivory, and textiles, while East Africa specialized in spices, cotton, and livestock. Additionally, the trans-Saharan trade connected regions over thousands of miles, fostering further economic growth and cultural exchange. For more than 4 centuries, stretching from West Africa to the Mediterranean in North Africa and Europe, extensive trade networks thrived. These exchanges included valuable commodities like gold, salt, slaves, and other goods, contributing significantly to the economic growth of the region. Similarly, the Indian Ocean trade linked East Africa to the Middle East, India, and Southeast Asia, bringing substantial wealth and prosperity to these areas. However, when Europeans arrived on the African continent, a new era began, marked by violence, exploitation, and plunder. Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, British, and French powers established trading posts along the coast. In these posts, they bartered firearms, alcohol, and textiles for slaves, who were captured in the interior and sold to European slave traders. This slave trade had dire consequences for African economies. It disrupted trade networks, dismantled local industries, and destabilized societies. The demand for slaves created a strong incentive for African rulers and traders to capture and sell their fellow Africans, leading to widespread violence and conflict. Entire communities were wiped out or forced to flee, resulting in depopulation in various regions. Moreover, this slave trade distorted the economic incentives in African societies. Instead of investing in sustainable activities like agriculture, mining, and manufacturing, African elites focused on capturing and selling slaves to European traders. This neglect of other economic sectors that could have provided stable sources of income hindered economic development. Furthermore, slavery's impact on Africa extended beyond the transatlantic slave trade. Even after the abolition of slavery in the 19th century, European powers continued to exert control through colonialism and imperialism. This had a detrimental effect on Africa's political, economic, and social development. European powers used their military and economic might to extract resources and suppress local cultures and traditions. The erosion of communities and families by slavery undermined the social fabric of many African societies, making it challenging for people to trust each other and collaborate effectively. This hindered the development of strong, stable societies and institutions that could support sustainable growth. European colonizers imposed their culture, values, and languages on the local populations, often suppressing local cultures and traditions deemed backward. This stifled innovation and creativity, preventing the emergence of a strong indigenous economy. Furthermore, European colonizers imposed their legal systems on African populations, erasing local legal practices and systems better suited to local needs and values. They used violence to maintain dominance, leading to the loss of countless lives and the destruction of communities and infrastructure. Perhaps most significantly, European powers imposed their economic systems on African populations. They viewed Africa as a source of raw materials and cheap labor, often forcing Africans to work in mines and plantations owned by European companies. This exploitation allowed European companies to maximize profits at the expense of the local population. The legacy of slavery and colonialism continues to impact Africa today, as many African populations remain disconnected from their cultural heritage and traditions. Despite the damage inflicted, African cultures persist and evolve. Efforts to revive traditional practices and reclaim cultural heritage are ongoing. If slavery and colonialism had never occurred in Africa, the continent might have been more economically and socially developed. Africa could have developed its industries, infrastructure, and unique cultural identity. The impact of slavery on African culture and economies is profound and far-reaching, affecting everything from traditional practices and beliefs to economic systems and human capital. Acknowledging this painful past is essential, as it continues to influence Africa's present and future. Building a more equitable and just world for all is a crucial step towards addressing the enduring legacy of slavery and colonialism.